President Sadat's dramatic decision to go personally to Israel is a gamble, perhaps the biggest one he has ever taken in the long, drawn-out search for peace in the Middle East. By going to Jerusalem, the Egyptian president will be giving official recognition to the state of Israel, something no Arab leader has dared to do. Many of the more militant Arab states have already expressed grave doubts about the advisability of such a trip. If his visit turns out badly, he risks his leadership of the Arab world, and there is always the danger that things could go so badly that the prospects for peace could be permanently damaged. But with the proposals for reconvening the Geneva Conference bogged down in disagreement, Sadat had to do something to break the stalemate. The Egyptian people, who have long suffered economic hardship, are generally enthusiastic about the proposed trip. On the streets of Cairo, people use such words as imaginative and daring to describe it. They hope success will produce the kind of peace that will allow the Egyptian government to spend more of its money on domestic needs and less on arms. But this support could quickly evaporate if Sadat's mission fails. This, in turn, could put the Egyptian president in serious political trouble at home. President Sadat has few options left. He's broken with the Soviet Union and has placed all his chips with President Carter. But with the Carter administration either unable or unwilling to pressure Israel for concessions, Sadat is going to Jerusalem to try on his own. As one Western diplomat put it, Sadat is now playing his last card. John Palmer, NBC News, Cairo. Word that Egyptian Foreign Minister Fahmy had resigned, along with his designated successor, was received here in Cairo with shock. Egyptian radio and television carried the announcement, but made no mention of the reason: President Sadat's trip to Israel. To President Sadat, the resignation of his foreign minister came as a blow just 48 hours before the Egyptian president's trip to Jerusalem. Morocco and Tunisia are supporting Sadat's startling political move. Sudan has given qualified support, but the more militant Arab states, including Syria, Iraq, Libya, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, have strongly condemned it. Syria is leading a campaign throughout the Arab world to force Sadat to cancel the visit, but that seems most unlikely. Sadat is publicly committed to go. Shortly after arriving back in Egypt following his visit to Syria yesterday, Sadat met with U.S. Ambassador Herman Eilts. The American ambassador gave Sadat the official invitation from Prime Minister Begin, and Sadat, in turn, formally accepted it. Already, Egyptian advanced personnel are en route to Israel. The strong objections to President Sadat's trip, which come not only from other Arab states but from Egypt as well, make it all the more important that his trip be successful. If Sadat does not come home with some kind of a concession from the Israelis, he risks isolation in the Arab world and could be in deep political trouble here at home. John Palmer, NBC News, Cairo. The Muslim call to prayer had a special significance today for the people of Egypt, because they all know that tomorrow their president will go to Jerusalem, a visit which President Sadat has called a sacred mission. Sadat attended noon prayers at a village mosque near the Suez Canal, just 12 miles from Israeli front lines in the Sinai Desert. He offered prayers for peace, and the congregation chanted in Arabic, "Go with God." Sadat intends to go despite strong condemnation from Syria, Iraq, Libya, and the Palestinian Liberation Organization. It is significant to the Muslim people that Sadat will pray at Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque, the second most sacred holy place in the Muslim world after Mecca. Even though several Arab leaders and even some Egyptian people object to the trip, the great majority of Egyptians support it. Most of the 40 million people living here are poor, very poor. They're hoping that Sadat's mission will be successful in bringing the kind of peace that will allow the government to spend more of its money on them and less on weapons and military supplies. Tassin Bashir, the Egyptian ambassador to the Arab League, spoke of the people's hopes for success.
The president is going on the eve of the Feast of Sacrifice, where the Muslims believe that God sacrificed a lamb instead of Ishmael. And the Jews believe that God sacrificed the lamb instead of Isaac. Let us hope that this time a new meaning will be given to that feast. It will be the sacrifice of occupation, of hatred, of enmity.
The resignations of Egyptian Foreign Minister Fahmy and his deputy who opposed the Sadat trip were followed today by other defections, although the government now says it has the situation contained. But if Sadat is not able to return home with significant concessions from the Israelis, his leadership of the Arab world and his political situation within Egypt will be seriously undermined. John Palmer, NBC News, Cairo. This is the jetliner that is taking President Sadat on his unprecedented trip to Israel. One of those traveling with President Sadat, NBC News correspondent John Chancellor, who boarded the plane at Cairo Airport. President Sadat has spent the day at his rest house in Ismailia preparing his speech for the Israeli Knesset. There was a mood of joy and optimism everywhere you went in Cairo today. Many Egyptians didn't have to go to work because of the beginning of the 4-day religious holiday in the Arab world. But the talk in the streets was mostly about President Sadat's historic trip. People said such things as, "We're tired of our sons dying. We want peace. And we hope Sadat will bring peace in the Middle East by his trip to Israel." They hope that a peace settlement with Israel will bring foreign investment, principally from the United States, so that the desperately poor Egyptian economy can be improved. There are some Egyptians who oppose the trip, such as Foreign Minister Fahmy, who resigned in protest just 2 days ago. But Egyptians who are opposed to the trip are mostly keeping silent, waiting to see now what happens in Israel, waiting to see if Sadat's visit can produce results. One opposition voice in Cairo has been silenced. The Egyptian government closed down the radio station operated here by the Palestinian Liberation Organization. The PLO has been sharply critical of the Sadat visit. The station is now playing Egyptian music. The significance of President Sadat's trip to Israel was summed up in an interesting way by an Egyptian newspaper columnist today. He said, "For the past 25 years, Egypt has lived like an ostrich with its head buried in the sand. In the meantime, Israel established a state which is now recognized by most countries of the world." The Egyptian editor concluded his column by saying, "All the Egyptians have done is to ignore this and to pretend that Israel doesn't exist." He said, "Now that must all change." John Palmer, NBC News, Cairo.
Here in Cairo, there was a lot of official optimism today and a lot of private praying. President Sadat has the press and the government on his side, the intellectuals and the students against him, and the hopes and prayers of the people of Cairo. One newspaper this morning, Al-Ahram, called his trip to Israel a small step for a human being, but a great leap forward for humanity. Are you listening, Neil Armstrong? There have been messages of support from the President of the United States, from the Shah of Iran, from the King of Morocco. But Sadat's visit has been opposed by the Libyans, the Iraqis, the Syrians, the Palestinians, and, bad news for Sadat, the King of Saudi Arabia has expressed serious misgivings about the trip. Since the Saudi government bankrolls the Egyptian economy, this puts additional pressure on Sadat. Yet, at the same time, the official and unofficial Egyptians I spoke with this morning feel that possibly, just possibly, Sadat's trip could lead to an end to the cycle of war truce, which has characterized the last decade and caused so much Egyptian blood. Sadat prayed at a mosque this morning, and the mullah said, all the holy books, Muhammad's Quran, Jesus' Bible, and Moses' Torah, have called for unity. So here in Cairo, they're scared, excited, uncertain, and proud of Sadat for striking out on his own. I think I may be the only American reporter to have been in both Israel and Egypt in the last 2 days. And the Israelis are far more enthusiastic about Sadat's visit than the Egyptians. One newspaper in Tel Aviv had a double headline, the word welcome, in both Hebrew and Arabic. When I left to fly here on charter airplanes, the Israeli owner of a charter service in Tel Aviv leaned in the plane as I was about to depart and said, "Make sure he comes." Well, he's coming. Let's see what happens now. John Chancellor, NBC News in Cairo.
President Sadat received a noisy send-off with two bands and a cheering crowd as he left his summer home in the town of Ismailia. He said goodbye to his vice president and other officials who were staying behind, then left on the first leg of his trip to Israel. While Sadat was en route, Egyptians began gathering at street cafes and in their homes to watch his arrival live from Israel on Egyptian television. It was an emotional scene. For most Egyptians, it was their first look at Israel. Those who were watching reflected the general mood of optimism in Egypt.
But we don't need any trouble. We need the peace.
Do you think you'll get peace now with President Sadat?
Yes.
Everybody in Cairo, they're happy because President Sadat to go to Israel. But I think so, and everybody in Cairo don't like trouble with Israel.
Not all of the people of Egypt support President Sadat's trip, but those who don't are remaining quiet. It's well after midnight here in Cairo now, the end of an historic day, not only for the Egyptian people, but for all the 100 million Arabs who have a vital stake in President Sadat's visit to Israel. It was a day of optimism and hope that when President Sadat comes home, he will bring with him encouraging news. John Palmer, NBC News, Cairo. The mood in Cairo continues to be one of optimism, coupled with a feeling of pride. Millions of Egyptians are following the events in Jerusalem on live television, direct from Israel. Egyptian newspapers today gave banner headline coverage to the visit. People here are especially impressed by the diplomatic courtesies and the warm reception given to their president. One newspaper headlined the fact that Sadat was given a 21-gun salute on his arrival. Another paper described the arrival as jubilant. A newspaper columnist said Sadat's visit has stunned the Israelis as much as the October 1973 Egyptian attack across the Suez Canal. Sadat's close advisors are especially pleased with the way the visit is proceeding, and they say if things continue to go this well, those who had opposed Sadat's trip in the beginning will be completely discredited. A few hours ago, an Egyptian on the street heard me speaking English, and he said, "Oh, you must be an American." And he smiled and said, "Shalom," the Israeli word for peace. That's the mood in Egypt today. John Palmer, NBC News, Cairo.
The Cairo newspapers are full of warm praise for President Sadat and his peace initiative in Israel. The press has carried almost no news of the harsh criticism of the mission by other Arab countries or of the attacks on Egyptian embassies. Sadat's appearance before the Knesset is a big day for Egypt, but it is a big day here for another reason.
Today starts a Bayram, a festival. This one celebrates the slaughter of the lambs by Abraham, and it lasts 4 days. Today is the holiest day of all. It is the Muslims' Christmas.
The pilgrimage to Mecca, the religious part of this holiday, began last night. Today, there were pilgrimages of another kind. Many Egyptians made their annual visit to the fabled pyramids. And no visit to the pyramids would be complete unless you tried to climb one. This is the Children's Day, so some of them opted for the more modern entertainment of an amusement park. And for some families, this celebration would not be complete without a visit to the Nile. That, of course, requires a boat ride. The boats are so full they don't look safe, but they do look like a good time. Despite all the festivities, the Egyptians are very aware of the Sadat visit, and they are hopeful.
I hope, and all the Egyptian people hope, he come back with peace and no more war again. This is what we need.
This Bayram is a happy, carefree day. but there will soon be a nationwide pause in this party as Egyptians listen to what their president has to say to Israel. Lee McCarthy, NBC News, Cairo.
The Sadat speech came on an important day in Egypt, a Bayram, a festival celebrating the Muslim equivalent of Christmas. Some Egyptians marked the day with a traditional visit to the ancient pyramids, others with a boat ride on the Nile. But many Egyptians interrupted their holiday to watch President Sadat on television. For the people in this cafe, it was their first look at Israeli leaders like Menachem Begin and Moshe Dayan. These Egyptians watched silently, almost stunned, as their president received a standing ovation from the Israeli parliament. The viewers offered their own applause as Sadat spoke, when he mentioned Egypt's strong desire for peace, and when he said that the rights of the Palestinians must be preserved. But during most of the speech, they did not react. When it ended, there was a final applause. Then most left the cafe without hearing what Menachem Begin had to say. Egyptians also watched the speech in their homes. Mamdou Samra is an engineer. He watched with his wife and daughters. Like the people in the cafe, they showed little emotion as Sadat spoke. But Samra said he is pleased by the visit and hopes it will bring peace to the Middle East.
It is a very good speech from our president. We want to live in peace. We prefer to live with the Israel in peace forever.
President Sadat finished speaking just as evening came to Cairo. The immediate reaction of some people here was that it was not a strong speech, but a nice speech. Not so much a plan for peace as a prayer for peace. Lee McCarthy, NBC News, Cairo. Mamdou Samra is an engineer in Giza, on the edge of Cairo. He and his family gathered around their television to watch the Sadat speech. They showed no emotion during the talk, even when they got their first look ever at some of the people who just a few days ago were their enemies, Israeli leaders like Moshe Dayan. Samra called the speech a good one, and he views the Sadat mission as many Egyptians do.
It may do something for peace. If not, we will not lose anything. But I think we will have opportunity in front of all the world that the Egyptians and the Arabs want to live in peace, but Israel don't want that.
The speech was televised at mid-afternoon in Cairo. Some people slipped into coffee shops to watch it. The viewers at this cafe did react a few times when Sadat called for peace in the Middle East, when he said Palestinian rights must be protected. But for the most part, they too were emotionless. When the speech ended, they applauded again and left before Israeli leader Menachem Begin spoke. Many people here believe President Sadat's message was more of a prayer for peace than a plan. They know he has made history, and now they await the Israeli response to what they consider to be a strong Egyptian initiative to settle the problems of the Middle East. Lee McCarthy, NBC News, Cairo.
They're arriving in Cairo on trains, buses, cars, and on foot to give President Sadat a huge welcome home when he arrives at Cairo Airport back from his historic trip to Israel. More than 3 million people are expected to line the 12-mile motorcade route from the airport to downtown Cairo. Government officials say they expect the largest crowd since the funeral of Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser 7 years ago. Security along the route will be very strong, with police and military units every few yards along the route. Egyptian newspapers and government radio and television stations have called on the people of Cairo to come out and show their appreciation to President Sadat for what he has done. This is the second day of the high Muslim religious holiday, so stores, offices, and schools are closed. This is expected to add to the turnout along the motorcade route. Since early morning here in Cairo, workmen have been putting up banners. Most of them say, "Welcome back to Egypt, man of peace," and "Long live President Sadat." This is the approach road to the Cairo airport. The first part of the motorcade will go along here. At the VIP arrival building at the airport, preparations are well underway for President Sadat's return. The red carpet is being laid out on the tarmac. Egyptian television is setting up equipment to carry the president's arrival live. The picture will be sent via satellite to many countries of the world. Military security guards have already been posted around the airport. With so many people lining the motorcade route, there is no way of telling how long it will take the presidential party to navigate its way 12 miles into the city of Cairo. The mood of the Egyptian people here in Cairo today is one of jubilation as they prepare a tremendous welcome home to President Sadat after his successful trip to Israel. But this mood of jubilation and joy is tinged with a bit of anger at a militant Palestinian group that has called for the assassination of the Egyptian president and a military overthrow of President Sadat because of that trip to Israel. Security around President Sadat, always strong, will be especially tight today. John Palmer, NBC News, Cairo. Days since your Whirlwind Peace Initiative, hasn't that changed? Hasn't the role of the United States changed? Aren't you holding the cards now, most of them?
Not at all. On the contrary, what has happened in the last 17 days emphasizes my idea about 99%. Why? It has been proved after my visit to Jerusalem, which has achieved its ultimate goal, as I told you. And this is to bring the wall of the barrier of the psychological barrier of difference between them. We have brought it down during this visit. For that, I consider my mission to Jerusalem a complete success, as I told my deputies in the parliament today.
But the role of the United States seemed to have been more involved than as of late. For instance, you have called the Cairo conference, not the co-chairman of the Geneva conference. You seem to have taken the ball, so to speak, in the last week or so, or 2 weeks. I'm
only facilitating the whole thing, and as I told you, I am giving I'm really trying to keep the momentum that I have already started by my move to Jerusalem through a good preparation for Geneva. For that, I proposed Cairo, because this is also part of the psychological problem. The Israelis was never admitted in any place in the Arab world. Well, they are admitted here. I have asked them to come as one party concerned in this conflict. But I must return to your question. What has happened emphasizes the importance of the American role, because, as I told you, the only party that can play a role in this conflict and which enjoys the confidence of both sides, and let me hope that the Israelis have the same confidence I have in Carter. Let me hope so, because if they have the same confidence that I have in Carter, I think in no time we shall reach an agreement. In no time. This is the importance of the role of the United States. On the contrary, it is emphasized.
Some people have criticized the Carter administration, saying that at least in the recent past, the Carter administration has either been unwilling or has been unable to put a significant amount of pressure on Israel or to convince Israel that concessions should be made. Do you go along with that criticism?
Well, as a matter of fact, you have heard me today telling my parliament that President Assad sent me an envoy. One of the points that he sent with his envoy was this point precisely. That is, the Americans doesn't want to exert any influence, and they are, even if they wanted, they don't have the capability to do so. But I'm against this 100%, as I told President Assad and the envoy of President Assad. No, not at all. Remember with me, may I remind you, the second disengagement agreement. The American administration was at its lowest at that time, the Watergate problem. Ford was not an elected president, he was an appointed president. Another Watergates like Lockheed and so, and then the elections coming, and so all this made the American administration very weak. For that, the Israelis rejected the first phase of the second disengagement agreement, rejected Henry Kissinger and sent him back to the United States. When I made, after that, my move toward this peace, opening the Suez Canal, and so I put the Israelis in a corner, really. And in September of the same year, we concluded the second disengagement agreement. This happened during the time that the American administration, as I told you, was in its lowest position with regards to the Congress or to the country or anything at all.
Is the Carter administration now in a position of strength, you feel, to fulfill this role?
For sure. For sure. For sure. I'm not asking Carter to drop any special relations with Israel at all. I'm not asking Carter also to be on my side against Israel. Not at all. Let him keep, let you keep the special relations with Israel. But let us seek peace built on justice. For example, when I visited Jerusalem, and this is, I think, very important, we spoke quite frankly. What is your problem, I asked them. They told me, we don't want any war again, and we want security. I said, I quite agree with you. I quite agree with you. Today I declared it in my parliament. There will be never any war after the October war, except if Israel chooses to try to impose its conditions and adopt the old arrogance policy of them. For that I promised the parliament to return to them and tell them. But from what I have known in Jerusalem, they are ready to sit and discuss in such a civilized way all the problems without any conditions. So for that, it is not only our effort that is needed to do this, but the effort of the United States. And this time, the United States doesn't need to do pressure here or there, but just to see what issues we are discussing and to tell that who is not, logic or correct, to tell him to be correct. That's my idea. For that, I tell you, the role of the United States is emphasized in the next step.
Mr. President, if you reach agreement in your preparatory conference here in Cairo, and then you go to Geneva and are successful there, what about the other Arab countries? What about those countries that might not have been involved in this process?
As I told you, I shall be seeking a settlement, not a bilateral agreement between me and Israel. I shall be seeking a settlement for the whole problem. In this case, if everything goes okay here in Cairo, and no one attends except one or two or whatever comes, I shall be proceeding to Geneva also. And as you said, if it proves to be a success and we can reach a settlement, in this case, I shall be asking for an Arab summit, and I shall put before them what I have reached. But mark this time I shall be proceeding until the end of the way.
So you won't stop along the way. You have your conference in Cairo. You will go to Geneva with whatever you have from Cairo and hope for a success there, and then call an Arab summit conference.
Arab summit, because it is not an Egyptian-Israeli settlement, it is an Arab-Israeli settlement. I'm not after Egyptian-Israeli settlement.
Mr. Sadat, can you give us any kind of a timetable? People talk about December the 21st as a possible date to reconvene the Geneva conference. Would that be too soon, do you think?
Well, no, it is not too soon. I think it is logic. But Geneva in itself is not an objective, as I told you. It is the good preparation, and if we couldn't convene by the end of this year, I mean in December, I think in the preparatory conference that I am asking for, we shall be always on the right track. And Geneva may come, I mean, early next year, but we should start working for Geneva from now. And as I proposed, from next Saturday, we are ready to receive all the parties concerned, with the two superpowers, the co-sponsors.
Mr. Sadat, as you said in your speech today, back in 1971, you launched a peace initiative, and nothing came of that peace initiative, and war came in 1973. Now you have launched another peace initiative, even on a much grander and a broader scale. What would happen if this one should fail?
We shall have no other alternative except to exercise our right to liberate our land. When? No one knows this.
But did you not agree with Mr. Begin that war was to be ruled out?
I quite agree to this. I declared this today in my parliament also. Yeah. And my people are hailing me because of this, really. And I shall be doing my best. But as I told my parliament also, I must report to them every step. Well, what if the Israelis return to their arrogant policy and so? They are putting us, I mean, they will be, they will be putting us in a position where we couldn't find anything except exercising our right to liberate our land. I don't think we shall reach this, because from the spirit I have seen there in Jerusalem with Begin, with Dayan, with Yadin, with Wiseman, I don't think we shall reach this at all, because both of us hail the idea of no war again.
One final question, if I might, Mr. President. You mentioned the holding of an Arab summit after Geneva. Do you see any need for any kind of an Arab summit before that time?
No need for that, because until this moment, and with the preparatory conference also, I shall be working in the context of the strategy that has been adopted by the Arab summit in Rabat. If there is any change, there should be a summit meeting, but there will be no change at all. This strategy consists of 2 points. The first one is the liberation of the land occupied after 1967. The second point is no compromise on the Palestinian question, and it should be solved, and the Palestinians should be given a homeland and the right for self-determination. The United States has agreed to this and declared it by Carter. So I don't think there will be any need now. But whenever there is new, development or so, that may touch the strategy, for sure I shall be asking for an Arab summit.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and we all wish you and all the leaders of the Middle East great luck, great fortune in resolving this very serious difficulty.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
One of the essential points in all of this is that the two documents produced at Camp David, one dealing with the occupied West Bank and Gaza district, the other leading to an Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty, need not be put into force together. Each can be enacted separately, which means that if they so desire, the Egyptians and the Israelis can have a peace treaty without a settlement involving the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza. In fact, Prime Minister Begin told me here today that some Israeli military forces might stay in that West Bank area for many, many years. Here he is talking about those things. Can we assume that if Jordan does not enter into the negotiations on the West Bank, that Israel and Egypt can still sign a peace treaty?
Mr. Chancellor, you will allow me to be careful, because I wouldn't like to embarrass President Sadat. We did not suggest to him a separate peace treaty between Israel and Egypt, because he has got difficulties in the Arab world. What we want is a comprehensive settlement, peace settlement. We want a peace treaty with Jordan, with Syria, and with Lebanon. And therefore, the second document takes this into consideration. But of course, nobody can become a stumbling block. We will negotiate peace treaties with any neighboring state which wants to negotiate with us. We cannot compel anybody.
As I understand it, Israeli forces, and I'd like to get back to their deployment, can remain in the West Bank area.
Will remain.
Will remain. How long? After 5 years?
And beyond.
And beyond.
Yes, sir.
Now, I think that's worth going into in more detail. Do you foresee, sir, the deployment of Israeli military forces in what we call the West Bank and you call Judea and Samaria for 5, 10, 15 years as a guarantee for Israeli security?
Yes, why not? Yes, possible. Because the issue is not of keeping forces, the issue of security of lives. But please, my friend, take note that my overriding sensitivity is Jewish blood. Too much Jewish blood was shed in our time, and we want security for the lives of our children and grandchildren, for the future generations.
If I'm an Arab from Palestine, what choices for citizenship would I have 5 years from now?
Any choice. We give them free option in citizenship. A Palestinian Arab can choose Jordanian citizenship or Israeli citizenship.
But the plan that was agreed upon at Camp David does not allow for that Palestinian to have Palestinian citizenship or a Palestinian passport.
We didn't agree to a Palestinian state. Mr. Chancellor, nobody now would agree. It would be a Soviet base in the heart of the Middle East, armed with the most striking weapons. Every house or home in Tel Aviv and in Jaffa and in Jerusalem and in Rehovot would be in the range of their artillery or even their machine guns. We would then put our civilian population, men, women, and child, into the range of the enemy's fire. That is absolutely unacceptable to us.
It is generally felt here in Washington that Israel got more out of the Camp David agreements than Egypt did. I put that question, among others, to President Sadat this afternoon.
This is not correct. The whole thing is balanced, really. And this was the cause why we stayed 13 days in in house detention in Camp David. It was because I insisted that we should have a balanced agreement upon or a balanced framework. For the Palestinians, for instance, the end of the military Israeli government, this is an achievement. The withdrawal of the Israeli forces, except in some points for security, this is achievement. the full autonomy for the Palestinians. This is achievement.
Prime Minister Begin says that there's some form of Israeli military force that will stay on the West Bank for maybe 10 years or 15 years or forever. He told me that today.
This will be subject to negotiations round the table because I'm not entitled to do this. Why? Because the legitimate parties concerned are Jordan and the Palestinians. So we didn't reach an agreement, or I didn't ask for an agreement on this because it should be decided by King Hussein, the Palestinians who have the claim of sovereignty on their land. It is not a claim for Israel. It is not a claim for King Hussein. And I told Mr. Begin this in front of President Carter.
One issue seems larger than any others, the real possibility of a separate peace between Egypt and Israel. If that comes, it means that Israel will not have to worry about war with Syria or war with Syria and Jordan. That's decisively important. If Israel doesn't have to fight on 3 fronts, it is strong enough to win on 2 fronts, which is why the Israelis want a separate peace, and which is why Anwar Sadat is being criticized today in parts of the Arab world. John Hart will have that story and more reaction after this.
To a former journalist who remains faithful to that great profession and aware of all the rules of the game. To fortify this wall through the accumulation of suspicion and distrust. It was only natural for this atmosphere to generate hatred and tension. 4 major wars, in addition to hundreds of skirmishes here and there, solidified this feeling and rooted it deeply in the minds and hearts of almost every person in the region. No party was able to impose its will on the other. However, the hysteria of war and stereotypes about the enemy and his intentions flourished on both sides. Under such circumstances, it was unthinkable for anyone to attempt to break this vicious circle. I gave the subject deep thought and deliberation. I was looking to deepen their commitment to that cause and prove to them that it is attainable. Thus, it was a must to usher in a new era with a new set of values and attitudes. I must tell you in all candor, however, that events of the past new weeks have caused us some concern. The Israeli government has chosen to go back into the vicious circle of arguing over every single word or comma. They are resorting again to the old tactics and worn-out ideas. One gets the impression that there is a deliberate attempt to erase the impact of the historic initiative and divest it of its driving spirit. This is most dangerous, and no one stands to gain of such a development. I firmly believe that the initiative belongs now to all the peoples on earth. It has become part of the collective human conscience. Mr. Chairman, dear friends, I knew all along that the road to peace was not full of roses. It is an arduous process that requires hard work, dedication, and perseverance. But I must tell you in all frankness that I was disappointed to see certain negative developments that could endanger our effort against all expectations and despite the goodwill that exists. As we proved beyond any doubt that we are willing, as we recognized that there is a security issue that should be met, as we did all that, we were told that there shall be no return to the 67 boundaries. We were told also that the Palestinian people are not entitled to the right to self-determination, which is a fundamental human right. We were told that the Israeli government would rather resign than compromise on the illegal settlements that were built on Arab land in defiance of world public opinion, as reflected in unanimous United Nations resolutions. We are told that the Arabs, Christians and Muslims alike, have no claim to Jerusalem. What is worse is that we are told that Israel does not need our recognition. This is not the spirit of the Jerusalem Initiative. This is no way to establish peace and eliminate war and hatred. This attitude is liable to revive old misconceptions and suspicions. It is apt to rebuild the old barriers between the Arab nation and the Israeli people. That would be most tragic indeed. It has been suggested as an independent entity in our midst that should not be taken lightly. I trust that you agree with me, dear friends, that it remains for the other party to reciprocate by demonstrating his willingness to assume his obligations within the framework of a comprehensive settlement. To be specific, he is required to accept the following: 1, withdrawal from all Arab territories occupied since '67 in conformity with the principle of inadmissibility of the acquisition of territory by war. 2, enabling the Palestinian people to exercise their natural right to self-determination. 3, providing for the necessary guarantees for the mutual security. It has been suggested that the establishment of any Palestinian entity, even when accompanied by all guarantees, means the destruction of Israel. This is a fallacy. A Palestinian state linked with Jordan will be a positive force of stability and normalcy in the area. Without it, the structure of peace will remain vulnerable. Any peace treaty could collapse so long as the Palestinians are left frustrated and unsatisfied. In short, that would be an open invitation to renewed violence and unrest. The conflict would be like a volcano in a dormant state which might erupt at any moment. Is this what we are looking for? The proposed Israel now that it is the heart and core of the entire problem. Another factor which stands in the way of justice is that the Israeli position is hardening rather than softening as we go along. This is an impediment to peace. After conceding their obligation to withdraw to the international borders of Egypt, they are saying that we should be contented with limited sovereignty over a certain part of our territory. When we showed appreciation and recognition of their need to feel secure, they began to put every conceivable item under the heading of security. The annexation of territory became a matter of security. The establishment of legal settlements on other people's land became a matter of security. establishing more illegal settlements, and expanding the existing property. The Israeli policy of settlements is a shortcut to chaos and lawlessness. We, together with world public opinion, hold the Israeli government responsible for jeopardizing the prospects for peace. If the Israeli government thinks that it can use these settlements as a leverage in the negotiations, the answer is no. It is stopped from using such an argument, for it knew all along that it was violating the law of nations as well as the norm of legitimacy. It had been said that Israel advised to be patient. I know that. I know that every process should take its due course. I am both realistic and pragmatic. But you must realize that efforts exerted to solve the dispute goes back to November 67. In other words, we did not start on Christmas Day 77. For over 10 years, both sides had an opportunity to articulate their positions and examine their available options. My initiative has not added any new element to the dispute itself, but it paved the way for resolving it. I sincerely believe that with goodwill and the spirit of reconciliation, we can reach a just and durable settlement in a matter of weeks. Now, I propose to address myself to two questions before you address them to me. The first is related to what I intend to do in the days ahead. The second is about what this country could do in order to help. I will proceed to answer the first question. By nature, I am neither a pessimist nor an alarmist. I am not given to despair or impatience. I never lose hope in the face of difficulties. To the contrary, I take this as a challenge. I also know that I am fighting for a noble cause. It is true that I am rather disappointed, but I am determined to persevere. I shall continue my mission for the sake of Arabs and Israelis alike. The challenge is not how to harden one's position, but how best to meet one's responsibility with courage and magnanimity. Instead of being prisoners of the past, we should possess enough vision to look to the future. I'm willing to give the experiment every possible chance until I reach the conclusion that enough time has elapsed without achieving any tangible progress. Until I reach the conclusion that enough time has elapsed without achieving any tangible progress, I'm not going to rush to this conclusion, but the other side has to demonstrate the same spirit. It takes two to negotiate and reach an agreement, as you know. Finally, I will outline to you my conception of the American role at this crucial crossroad. We do not want to cause you any problems, but we need your help to settle our problem. You have a special relationship with one party and a relationship of friendship and amity with the other. Israel relies heavily on your country, militarily, financially, and politically. On the other hand, you have global interests. That puts you in a unique position to exert your influence and good offices for the sake of peace and stability. We are not asking you to take sides or to be partial. You are expected merely to be faithful to your own tradition and values. I'm sure that you cannot be indifferent to the plight of the Palestinian people. Can the Americans who fought for their independence turn their backs to the right of self-determination? This right is the collective embodiment of human rights. Can the Americans tolerate, let alone support, the acquisition of territory by force? Do you accept the concept of secure borders as a means of expansion? When spacecrafts are falling from the sky on foreign countries, how can anyone speak of security being defensible borders? Did not the October War prove the fallacy of the argument of defensible borders? The constructive American role, as we conceive it, is more than that of a go-between. You are a full partner in the establishment of peace. You have a reservoir of goodwill behind you. In our judgment, you can work with the parties to accelerate the process. You can help them avoid the prospect of slipping back into the exchange of rhetoric and futile argumentation over procedural and marginal points. You can insist that disputes should be settled through compliance with the rule of law, not by submission to the dictates of force. President Carter has devoted his time and efforts to help us reach a just settlement. He has been very helpful and understanding. He is a man of wisdom and courage. I enjoy dealing with him. I told him in our talks at Camp David that we urge him to continue to play a positive role in the interests of both parties. Efforts will have to be doubled if we are to reaffirm the faith of many people in the area that peace is attainable. It is important to see that we are achieving progress as we go along in the process. We do not want to concentrate on procedure. The goal is substantive progress. Form is no substitute for substance. Technique cannot solve all problems. Now, I can almost see a question mark on many faces with respect to our request for American arms. Let me state the following. We are anxious to stop the arms race. We are looking forward to the day when our acquisition of arms is minimal. We would even like to see the entire region demilitarized. We were the first to call for making the Middle East a nuclear-free zone. But that cannot be a unilateral act on our part. If we are to de-emphasize armament, the other party must do the same. We are concerned with our security too. We have more reason to feel that way with part of our land still occupied. If the United States decides not to accelerate the arms race, we should welcome that. But if it takes another position,